So what we're going to do now is we're going to take this box we've been working with and use these different sub-object levels to adjust it into an actual object. I think what we're going to do is we're actually going to make it into a mailbox. We're going to try to form this into a shape that you guys can recognize and help us do a couple different techniques. The first thing that I want to address is this modifier panel has a lot of information in it as we scroll all the way down. And a lot of these tools I'd like to get to faster than having to scroll to it and scroll back up. So what we can do is between the active viewport here and the actual modifier panel, if I move my mouse slowly, you'll see it change in this double arrow. And if I click and hold and I just drag towards the center, I'll get this extra tab right here, which is just the rest of the information basically populated out. I can actually do it a third time if I want all of it, but this last part of information, this subdivision surface information, I really don't need it. I don't use it that often, so I can actually close it and just grab right here again in the same location and just drag back and hold. So I can see all my tools right away. I don't have to go digging for them, which will make me faster. So let's get back to actually modifying this. The first thing I'm going to probably want to do is I'm going to want to lengthen my box a little bit, so it's a little more of a actual shape of a mailbox. So I'll select the polygon tool, and another quick tip is the move, the rotate, and the scale tool all have shortcuts on the keyboard, and those are respective. The move is W, which you'll see is selected currently. If I select E, I'll go into the rotate tool, and R is the scale tool. Now you might not need to use it very often now, but later when making large selections, you can also hit the Q key. And what this will do is it'll allow you to add to your selection, like you're still selecting things, but you're not on any kind of widget. So if you accidentally, let's say that you were on the move widget and you wanted to select on our face, but you accidentally clicked and held for too long, you can actually accidentally shift things around. The Q one will just help you select faces, but there's no ability to move it. So you're not going to end up with any errors later on. So anyways, I'm going to hit Q and I'm going to go back to the move widget and we'll keep working on this. So the first thing I'm going to probably want to do is just kind of lengthen this out a little bit, just so we have a little bit more depth. And I might want to just kind of maybe lengthen the back a little bit and scrunch up the front. And then we'll just always remember, we want to try to work as close as we can to this 0, 0 space. We'll cover later videos how to actually set up our models and move them closer to there and snap its pivot and its rotational things. But for now, we're not too worried about that. The next thing I'm going to probably want to do is I'm going to curve the top of this. So how we're going to do this, we're going to have to actually add edge loops in here, loops around, so that we have vertices to grab onto and edges to actually make a round shape. So what I'll do is I'm going to go to edge mode. I'm going to select my first edge. Now what I can do is I can manually select all the edges around by holding Control and selecting them. So now I have all of the edges in a ring around the box. I can come over now to my expanded command panel here, and I can click connect, and it'll put one down in the very center. Now I could select this and move it up, but it's not really round enough for what I'm looking for. This is more of like a house. So I'm actually going to undo that, and I'm actually going to show you another faster way to grab those ring of edges. So remember always, ring around a finger, so we're not going to actually follow it. So there's an option right here that lets me just ring the selection. So right now this edge is selected. It will do a ring around. So when I click on this, it'll now select all those. And all I have to do is come over to connect, and then any modifier in this edit edges panel, anywhere you see this little box next to it, it's called settings. It's just a more expanded version of whatever it is when you just click on the word itself. So if I come over here to settings, I get a few more options right on my screen on how I can edit this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the segments and move it up a couple. Let's do about 4. So we have some stuff to work with. I have a couple points I can move around. I don't really need to pinch it. I don't really need to slide it. I kind of want it centered like it is. So I'm going to hit OK to this. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to probably start to round the top a little bit. So I'll go back to face mode by hitting 4 on the keyboard. I'm going to grab the 2 next to it as well. And I'm going to pull up and I'm going to start to make a rounded top. And then what I can do is I can grab just the middle one and pull that one up as well. And now you can see, if I just hit 6, I'll leave the mode, that I have this rounded top. Now it's not perfect. It's not completely round. It's not 100%. But in video games, we work a lot this way, where the silhouette you're trying to use as few points as possible to make the change of surface that you're needing. So this is pretty low. We could come in here and put a million edges in here and make this thing super awesome, but in the video game, at the end of the day, it's not that important that it gets that many edges. So we want to be conservative about how much typology, how many edges we use, how many vertexes we use, etc. The next step I probably will do is I'm going to try to take this front and actually make this into more of a box shape so mail could go in. Right now it's kind of like a piece of bread, you know, a loaf of bread. So I'm going to grab the polygon tool here. I'm going to select the front faces. I'm going to select multiple like that by holding down Control and clicking on them. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my tools here and look for an option called Inset. I'm going to click on the Settings tab again this time. What Inset allows me to do is take a selection and actually make a selection that goes inside of it. Think of it as just making an ability to kind of shrink my selection so I have these extra kind of loop now appeared, but I didn't have to do anything special to create it. Once I commit this, I can now just go to Extrude, go to the Settings tab again, and instead of extruding out what it's trying to do here, I can actually set this setting to go in, and I'll actually take this all the way in. And once that's done, I'll hit OK and accept it. Now, I might want to get this inside face really close to the back. So what I'll do, like we said before, is I'll hit F3 and it'll give me a wireframe mode, and this will help me to see how far away I am from the back face. So I don't go through it, but I don't make it too close as well. So I'll hit F3 to go back to wireframe again, shaded view, and now I can see if I just unselect everything. That's not a bad start to my mailbox. But what is a mailbox without a door? So we can do the door a couple of different ways. One of the ways we could do it is we could go back to the Create tab. We can make sure we're on Geometry, Standard Primitives, Box. And I can actually click and drag out and make a new door. And what I would have to do is click on it, convert to an edit poly. Remember, this step is very important. I'm also going to apply a material just so we can see it. So remember, Material Editor. And then you can apply the same material as the other part. They'll just share the same way they look. So I'll click on this Assign Material to Selection because my door is selected. And now it has been applied. I can close my Material Editor down and I don't have to worry about it anymore. Now what I can do is I can come in here and go to Edge Mode, do a ring selection because I want to add more connections just like the box so that it will match the door. Ring selection. I'm going to connect, and I'm going to do 4 connections just like last time. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure everything's lined up. So I'm going to go to vertex mode. I'm going to drag a selection. I'm going to make sure, I'm going to use middle mouse to zoom up. I'm going to make sure I'm just on the z-axis, kind of lining things up. If I want a lot of precision, I can always hit like F, and then this will check this is the front view. So if I really wanted to be my true front, I could rotate the entire model 90 degrees. But for now, this works for me. Once I make sure that those are about the same level, I'm actually going to exit sub-object mode so I can move the whole object. I'm going to move the door closer. And I'm going to go back to vertex mode, and I'm actually going to make it a little bit thinner because I feel like this door is pretty thick. Okay. I'm going to hit P to go back to perspective mode. And I'm going to go to polygon mode, select these top ones just like I did with the main body. I'm going to move them up to the same spot. Just like that. And then I'm going to go to sub-object mode. I'm going to leave. So now I have a door and a body. And if you did it the same way I did, the pivot point is wherever the gizmo is on the object. So if I actually rotate this currently, it'll rotate around its origin. Now something else really fast, if you're interested, see the angle is very arbitrary. It's not moving by a very precise amount. We can change that very quickly. What we can do is we can click on this angle snap toggle button up here, and by default I think it's set to 5 degrees. And I just leave it on most of the time. Most of the time, 5 degrees is more than enough for 99% of what my needs are as an environment artist. Very few, unless you're doing really, really ornate organic objects, do you need anything else. But now that we have a door, I'm just going to kind of leave it down for now. We can actually raise it back up. We'll put a little handle on this. And I'll move it, make sure it's not colliding. And so we'll do one more thing. We'll go back to Create tab. We'll go to Box. And I'll just draw out a little box. And again, I'm going to go to Material. I'm going to make sure I'm selected on one. I'm just going to apply. Nothing fancy. I'm going to close the window. And then I can kind of take this little box up. And I'm going to line them up kind of in the middle here, as close as I can. Now, something we don't want to do as 3D artists is if I have this box and I convert it to an editable poly, because remember, I can't do anything with it unless I convert it, is that there's a face back here, okay? And if I were to just push it into this other geometry, what would happen is the computer at the end of the day would still try to render that, even though the player would never see it. So anytime there's a face that goes inside of another polygon, like we're going to push this one inside of it, we can actually just hit delete. We can delete those faces. They don't need to be there. So if I were to grab the vertexes and pull us out, you can see that there's no face back here. But because I'm going to push it into some other polygons, that's okay. This is an accepted practice. We're allowed to get away with this. I wouldn't recommend doing it all the time, but when you need to, make sure you don't leave the extra face back there. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to kind of move this up. And I'm going to maybe I'm going to make a selection, and I'm going to pull this up as well. And I'm going to end up actually coming in here, going to Edges, doing Ring, and then a Connect. And I'm going to move that a little bit forward. I'm going to go to Face Mode, and I'm going to extrude this down in front. Looks like a little long. That's not bad. And now what I want to do is I'm going to add a little bit of flare. This looks like it might be just a little bit too far away from the door for my liking. Maybe a little bit longer as well. So we'll grab this, make it just a little bit longer. And remember, if you have geometry, you might as well use it. So if I come in here, you can see I could probably raise these up just to make it a little more interesting. It's not just so flat. Obviously, if you're making a very technical model that you're making it from blueprints and it is extremely flat, that's fine. But nothing in real life is 100%. So sometimes it's not bad as an artist to kind of take some liberties and kind of stretch things a little bit, especially in video games when we're so limited. And then maybe what I'll do is I'll take these bottom ones and I'll use this scale tool and just kind of move them in a little bit, just to add a little variety, so it's not so plain. That doesn't look bad. One thing I might change that I don't like about the realistic viewport rendering is the ambient occlusion that's happening in real time, this kind of graying around here. So we can actually just click on realistic, go to configure, and you're going to get this visual style appearance tab, so make sure that's selected. There's two options here, shadows and ambient occlusion. I usually just turn ambient occlusion off. It's just a preference. You can leave it on if you enjoy it. Me personally, I just don't like it. If you want to leave it on, leave it on. If not, just hit OK. And you'll see we're just getting shadows now in the realistic render, which I feel is more appropriate. The next thing we're probably going to do is put a little flag on the side. So again, like I've told you, we'll do box a million times. I'm going to make a new box. I'm going to drag it out. I'm going to go up to the material editor. I'm going to apply that first one just so we can see it. And then what I'm going to do is, like we always, if I don't turn it to convertible object, just this option, convert to an editable poly. And I'll go to edge mode. Make sure to turn wireframe back on when you're working so you can see what you're doing. We did a ring select. Now all I'm going to do is I'm going to do a connect. Drag up. I'm going to select the face that I want to extrude. Extrude this out. I'm going to make a little flag for the side. Go to edges. I feel like this is a little bit short, so I'm going to pull it down just a little bit. Go back to polygons here. Shrink this up. Now I could do the same action by just selecting all 4 of the verts there as well. It's the same move, just a different technique. It all works out in the end. So we kind of end up with this little flag here. Now, if I feel like it's a little bit wide, I can scale the whole object without being in sub-object mode. Or what I can do is I can grab faces on one side and then just move them in. That works. It works for me. What I might also do for a little bit of variety, like I said before, I might scale this in just a little more, just so it's a little more bent, has a little more information. It just takes it that little bit farther away from being completely CG. What I might do next, I'll make a little holder for this flag. So again, we'll go to box. I'll draw a little box and pull it up. I'll apply material, close it, drag it up, and then I'll kind of just remember what I said again. Once we convert this to an editable poly, there's going to be a polygon on the inside back of this square that once I push it into the mesh will never be seen. So I'm going to hit delete on my keyboard and get rid of it now. I'll go back to object mode and I'm going to just make sure that that highlighted wireframe goes inside the mesh. That's all I'm looking for. Once it's gone, it means that the player can't see it and it won't matter. We won't have any holes either. I'm going to move this up, go to face mode, move this in. I'm going to get this kind of close to the size so that it kind of looks like it sits in there. Maybe I'll move these in a little bit. Pull this down, move those in. And then I'll move the bottom just to have a little bit of variety. I'll exit. Doesn't look bad. If I wanted to, I could probably add a slot that this thing sits in. So I would do a ring select. And then what I would do is I would do connect. I would do 2 connections. And then see, this, it's not sitting perfectly where I want it in the slot. So I can actually do a slide and then use a pinch to kind of move it apart a little bit more. And that'll kind of give me a trench to work with. Now I don't want it to go all the way around. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do 2 edges. I'm going to do a ring select this way. I'm going to connect. And I'm going to do 1 connection. Let's do 1 at the bottom. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to end up actually coming into face mode. I'm going to delete these 3 faces. And once I hit delete, you're going to see now I'm missing a polygon here and in the inside too. So I'm going to actually have to create a polygon to fill that information. Right now there's just nothing there. So I'm going to select one edge, one side I'm trying to create. I'm going to select the other side of the one I'm trying to create. Oops, sorry. Holding down control. So now I've controlled 2 edges across from each other. And I'm just going to click bridge. It's a tool over here. And now it's filled out with a polygon. I'm going to do the same side for this side. So select this edge, and then the edge, I'll show you here, right across from it. And that's on the way. And I'm just going to click bridge. And bridge is going to just make a polygon between the 2 edges, between the 2. Just like, think like a bridge would be made between 2 canyons. It's just going to make a polygon between your selection bridge. So now that's been all patched up. And that's good to go. We wouldn't want to leave holes in there, especially because the player would be able to see inside there. So we've kind of got this like little mail slot thing on the side, and then maybe I'll just add a little spice. We'll use another object. So we'll go back to the create panel, geometry, and this time let's use a sphere. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag it out, and I'm going to apply material to it. And here in our raw data, we can kind of take a look. This sphere is a pretty dense, and by that I mean look at how many lines are on it compared to the number of dots and lines that are on our entire mailbox so far. There's quite a few. This is actually overkill, especially for how small it's going to be. Usually the smaller the objects, the less points it's going to need because it's that much smaller on the map. You know, it's not that important. So what we can do is we can go to the modify panel before we've converted this. And where it says segments, we can actually turn this way down. I might go to like 6. Maybe 8. 8 seems fine. And so now we have a much more consistent amount of data comparative to our low poly mailbox here. We don't have a lot of information. We don't have a ton of detail. And so this bolt should be the same. It shouldn't have a ton of verts and vertices and vertexes. We just don't need it, especially for how small it's going to be at the end of the day. So once that's created, I'm going to do the same thing I've always done. Convert to editable poly. Go to face mode. I'm going to make a selection over the bottom. And I'm actually just going to delete them, because we don't need them at all. Because this is going to be a bolt and it's going to be on the side. Once I've deleted it, I can come in here and I can rotate 90 degrees. And all I'm going to do is I'm just going to push it into the other geo. And I'm going to line it up. So I'm going to line it up so it looks like a little bolt is going through this and into the flag. So I'm going to make sure it's small enough that it looks like it actually could be held by the flag. And then again, I got to make sure that that white line that is the back side that we don't want, behind there's no geo, is pushed into this far enough that it won't make any errors later for us. I'll make it a little bit smaller. It looks a little bit big for my taste. There we go. And then maybe the last thing I'll do is I'll add a little hinge along the bottom here. And all we have to do is we'll come in here, we'll go to cylinders again, and I'm gonna make not a cylinder, yeah. Sorry about that. And I'm gonna click just like a box, then I'm gonna drag up, just like a box, the same method. I'm gonna apply material, and then I'm gonna rotate this 90 degrees. I'm gonna use the move tool, and I'm just gonna kind of cover up both of those so it looks like it's welded together. I'm going to convert it to an editable poly. Go to vertex mode. Now, the thing about this tool is, see it's got these extra blue vertices in the middle here? These aren't really that important because we really only want vertices where we have a silhouette change. So if I turn off wireframe here, you can see those vertices really aren't doing anything for us. They're just kind of wasting information. Now, if these vertices were coming out and doing these extra things, yes, then they're important. So we're actually going to want to get rid of these loops that it created by default. Now, what we could have done, if I actually leave the object and go back, I can actually delete them at the object level before we convert them to an editable poly. But let's say that you accidentally didn't delete them and you converted it to an editable poly and you couldn't get back. You'd made enough changes, you didn't want to delete them. What we can do is we can select one edge, and instead of ringing like we have been, we're going to loop. Think of like a hose that continues, a loop, okay? So I'm going to hit the loop button over here in the modifier panel. And what we're going to do is instead of just hitting delete, we're actually going to hit control backspace. And why we do that is because if we were just to grab this loop, I'm going to do it on this one, and I were to hit delete, it would delete all of the faces associated with that loop as well. We don't want that. If I were just to hit backspace, it looks like it did a good job. It deleted the loop we don't want. But if I go to the vertex level, it leaves the vertexes behind, but deletes the segments that were between them. This is super messy, and you never want to see this in your models. If you ever see just vertices that are floating by themselves here, they're not connected into quads or triangles, you want to go ahead and then probably select them, and then at that time, hit backspace over them as well. But we can avoid that completely if we go to edge mode, and then what we do is we loop it, and we hold control and click backspace. This will get rid of the edge and get rid of the vertices. And both of those things are what is adding up and going to make our files bigger and in the long run slower in the game. So I'm going to do it for these two as well. Loop it, and then I'm going to do control backspace. And then the last guy, loop it, control backspace. Now the only thing I really need to do is just go to vertex mode, kind of size this in, and then grab this guy and size this in. Now the end of these cylinders, what this is this is considered an n-gon. We have just this giant, if I go to quad, if I go to poly mode, you'll see it's just this giant massive thing, but it's not a square. It's all these points just randomly getting triangulated by the engine later. But right now there is no triangulation in it. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to clean this up in a video game way. And there's a really fast way. First of all, what we're going to do is we're going to select this and we're going to delete it. Just going to get it out of our way. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to find two edges across from each other, and I'm going to hold control, and I'm going to do a bridge on this. And what that'll do is it'll kind of establish how I want to cut this up. Now you can see right here I'm trying to scroll around and it's going very slow. Anytime you have anything selected, even the sub-object level, Just along ago in the other video, if we hit Z on a big object, it'll frame it. Even on the tiniest object, a vertex, if we hit Z, it'll frame in on that specific tiny one, and it kind of makes everything relative again to that scale. So I'll just hit Z to kind of get me closer to what I'm working on. Now what I'll do is I'll select these other ones next to it, across from each other. I'll hit bridge, and then I'll do it again, bridge, and I'll do it one more time, bridge, and I'm left with a triangle. So I can't use the bridge. What I can do is I can use the border tool, which just looks at kind of like an open space. So like here, there's an open space, it'll just fill it all. So I'll click on this little one and I'll just hit cap. And the cap will just kind of fill that area. Even if I had this giant one, I'll make a new end-gon. That's not really what I want. So I'm just gonna come over here again, click these, click bridge, click these, bridge, click this, bridge. Use the border tool, or I can, if I want to, just be in edge mode and hold control and select all three, and then hit the cap button, which would be under border. So what I want to do is I want to convert this selection to a border selection. And how I can do that is I can hold down control and then click on border, and it'll keep my selection but move it to a new sub-object. And so that's really useful sometimes when I have polygons selected, and let's say I wanted to select these 4 vertices. Well, instead of actually select them, I can grab this polygon, and then I can just hold down control and click on vert, and it'll convert my selection into the new sub-object. So it's a really useful tool later on, especially when you want to start selecting large things. Instead of having to grab all this around there, I can just convert the selection. Now I'm going to do it very quickly on this other side. Make a jump across, bridge it. Now I actually have a shortcut built into my 3D modeling software where I can call up bridging. Now at a later date, I suggest everyone, once you get more comfortable with the tools, setting up shortcuts for every action that you use repetitively. It'll save you a considerable amount of time in the modeling process, where you will eventually not have to even use the modifier panel to the side. But for now, it's good to kind of learn where the tools are in case your shortcuts stop working or anything like that. But now you can see we have this kind of cleaned up mesh. It's not an end-gon anymore. It's a bunch of quads and triangles, and that's exactly what we're looking for. So I'll make final adjustments to this. I'll just kind of move things in a little bit. Just make it a little bit neater. Doesn't look like the manufacturer was sloppy. And I'll take a look at this. It doesn't look like a bad first model at all. So now we can take a look at it. What I might do is, let's say I wanted the door to kind of open or be open in the model. And what happens is, whenever I rotate it, the handle stays in the same spot. I don't really want that. So what I'll do is I can actually attach these objects together. So I'll take the front door, and there's a button over here called attach. I can just click on it, and then click on any mesh that I want to attach to it. So now those meshes highlighted together, I actually edit them at the same time now as well. So I can come back here, and now they'll pivot together. Pretty useful. So I want you guys to try to see if you can make your own mailbox. And then in the next episode, we'll go over some homework for you guys to practice before the next modeling course.